You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hello there, this is Alex. Thanks again for coming to join me. I'm so glad that you're here. We are getting into some really awesome stuff with these podclasses, and we are getting close to the end, but this is going to be the things where it's going to all come together for you. You're going to be like, oh, I get it. This is the real cycle stuff, and it totally gets us into the mindset to do testing and really get an answer instead of just aimlessly wandering and getting like a whole, ask me how I know this, but I know half of you have a supplement graveyard of half-tried things that you've done and didn't work. I totally have had to clear that out throughout my life. You probably have some programs that you started and you have a whole like slew of doctors that you saw once and didn't follow up with, right? You are probably like, oh my gosh, yes, how did you know? And that's because I've been there. And once again, we have our soothing background noises of my dog Whiskey snoring, and I apologize for that. But know that he's cute, and if you come see us over on Instagram, that's zesty_ginger, you'll see copious amounts of dog pictures that I've posted. So at least his cuteness makes up for the snoring in the background. All right, so today we are going to be talking about estrogen. So that is estrogen excess and estrogen deficiency. And these are things that you may have actually been told or you had a hunch that you had. And so if you haven't already, make sure that you listen to the Podclass on hormone testing. But we talked about the Dutch test that we use and what all that shows us. And estrogen is really interesting because there are, we can look at estrogen excess and then how the estrogen is metabolized, or estrogen deficiency and how estrogen is metabolized. And all parts of those matter for how you feel and what the symptoms that show up for you. We're also, in future ones, going to talk about progesterone and testosterone because those really interface in as well. And so estrogen excess, we're going to talk about that first. So a lot of times estrogen excess is the classic kind of like PMS, hormonal acne, low libido, angry mood swings type of picture. And so estrogen excess is basically when you are either being exposed to a lot of estrogen, so a lot of hormone mimicking compounds or phytoestrogens in food or xenoestrogens in like beauty products and stuff. Either that's high or your body is actually creating a lot because it can't recognize that it already has too much, or it happens because you can't metabolize it or you can't break it down. And then you have what amounts to partially inactivated hormones just running amok in the body, kind of working the way they should, but kind of not. So you get this really weird picture where like you feel just as crappy as if you had low estrogen, but it's just like this muddled up picture. So ends up being pretty miserable. Right, so it can be any one of those, and the Dutch test will basically give you, it shows you exactly how much is made and then how it all gets used and broken down. And so you can get a really complete picture of what's actually happening and where along the pathway is the breaking point, because when you fix that, then a lot of times the other things will fix themselves in response to it, but you have to know where the leverage point is. Okay. And so for that reason, that's how we test. And that's for the excess. So it'll show you exactly what's happening. When you go, the reason going by symptoms doesn't always work is because if I were to read you, and this can be your homework to go Google on your own, but when you do symptoms of estrogen excess and deficiency, you'll see that there are a lot of symptoms that are on both lists. For example, low libido is on both lists. PMS and acne and mood swings and anxiety, depression end up being on both things. So it's really hard the only way you can really do it without testing is to try to go down one pathway, and if things get worse, then try something else and then kind of troubleshoot from there. It's a really ineffective and laborious way to do it, and you can actually end up sustaining more damage because for example, if you have a lot of estrogen and it's not being metabolized well, but you misdiagnose yourself as having low estrogen and you start eating a bunch of like broccoli sprouts and all the foods that we'll talk about boosting estrogen, you will actually make things a whole lot worse for yourself. And there is a point in the endocrine system, even though it's incredibly flexible, incredibly malleable, really responsive to things, kind of like our thyroid is a great example. It does so much stuff, but there is a point where if you accrue enough damage to the system or the organ, then you may always need support in that department if the damage to those tissues continues to happen. And so for that reason, we do want to be careful. So, just because someone told you, oh, those symptoms sound like X, you always want to take that with a grain of salt because you want to be the most specific as possible so that you don't inadvertently make things worse. That's why going by symptoms is hard, but that is not to say that we don't take symptoms into account. So, for example, in our Healthy Hormones group program that Megan and I run, we will have them just like we do the Dutch testing and the neurotransmitters. We have what is a laughable intake questionnaire. Everyone's always like, what? Why are there so many questions and stuff? But that's because it does matter what all your symptoms are. And a lot of times that guides portions of the protocol based on what someone has told us and what we see in the lab results. And so they will guide us, but it's really hard to just go by those. Okay, so that's my spiel on there. So that was estrogen excess. And for estrogen excess, what we want to do is help mobilize estrogens and phytoestrogens and xenoestrogens out of our body, and then be really good at breaking down the hormones that we do have. So I just wanted to give, because we're always action-oriented ladies, I wanted to give you some stuff to do if you're like, oh yeah, that is what I haven't been diagnosed with, that's what my testing said. For dietary support for excess estrogen, you would want to do things like include a lot of sulfur-rich veggies. Those are your mushrooms, your onions, your garlic, stuff like that. Cruciferous veggies are great. Foods that are kind of a rich color, like raspberries, blackberries, pomegranates, the berries with that color are really, really helpful. Walnuts are really great fiber-rich foods because they are going to fiber essentially acts like a little broom in your gut, picking up excess estrogen that need to be removed from the body. If you don't have enough fiber to do that and you are just kind of retaining all of those estrogenic compounds, then they will get eventually over time absorbed back into the bloodstream. And so you'll just keep reabsorbing all the stuff that you're trying to metabolize. And that can be really, can be really dangerous, so to speak. You also want to avoid food sources of estrogen. And obviously, when we go to deficiency, this is going to be totally flipped around. But you want to avoid things like soy because it looks like estrogen, phytoestrogens like alfalfa, broccoli sprouts, all of the things that keep listening to this even if you have excess, because there'll be things that you pick up. And then xenoestrogen, so that's really cleaning up your beauty routine, the lotion that goes on your skin, the exposure that you have through shampoo, conditioner, body wash, makeup, deodorant, toothpaste, things that you put into your mouth. Like as you go through the cycles, and as we've talked about kind of cleaning up your environment in the second half of your cycle, every cycle just update a new thing. It doesn't have to be all at once, although if you get excited and you want to, go for it. But if you just want to update, every month you run out of one thing and you get a cleaner version of that, you will really over time decrease the amount of xenoestrogens that you have exposed yourself to. And that makes a really big difference. For some people, that alone is kind of like the thing that allows them to go back to not having symptoms, because they were just exposing themselves to so much xenoestrogens that simply decreasing the intake will help their body. Their body's pretty good at metabolizing stuff. It just needs to not be so overwhelmed. And sometimes that's what it takes. But many of us, even if that doesn't fix everything, it still is a big step and a really helpful one in helping us feel our best. All right, so that is estrogen excess. Let's go on to estrogen deficiency, because that is equally important. So estrogen deficiency is when you're either not creating the compound of estrogen, either because you don't have the building blocks or you don't have the right signal, or you're really aggressive at metabolizing the estrogen, or you're just not metabolizing it to the right thing. And so most of the time, it gets converted to an inactivated hormones and leaves the body. But there can be abnormalities where it gets shuttled into another pathway, and there's a whole nother metabolite that's created that doesn't get removed, and it floats around the body creating problems. So that's how estrogen deficiency works. And anything that hurts your ovarian tissue will also be a direct way. So if you have PCOS with lots of cysts taking over your ovaries, or endometriosis, where like for mine, I had on both sides destruction of the ovarian tissue from the endometriosis basically kind of feeding into and infiltrating the ovaries. It could be adhesions from previous surgeries, damage from trauma, you name it, but structural things can also impact this stuff. So then you get a lot of the same symptoms, but a lot of the estrogen deficiency specifics end up being around things like kind of hot flashes, mood swings, vaginal dryness, pain, recurrent UTIs, pain during sex, pain during urination, constipation, things like that. All right, so that's the prototypical person. Again, it's really hard to go by symptoms, so I tend to not focus. I tend not to start there. I just add the symptoms in as a way to support what I'm thinking. Okay, and so that's how it occurs. What can we actually do about it? Let's talk about dietary support. So in these folks, if you fall into the estrogen deficiency category, it's really important to actually try to incorporate phytoestrogens into your life. We still never want to add xenoestrogens. I mean, just because it's low, don't go smothering yourself in crappy products. You want to create actual hormones, or support your body with hormones instead of trying to cover up something, right? So obvious, I would think that would be obvious, but just in case, I'll say it. for dietary support, the phytoestrogens that you would want to focus on are a combination of either providing your body with phytoestrogens or providing healthy fats and other compounds that become the building blocks. And so foods with phytoestrogen are things like sweet potato, yam, asparagus, broccoli, green beans, onions, alfalfa sprouts, thyme, parsley, turmeric, prunes, dates, peaches, dried apricots, blackberries. That's a really long list, right? Or there's also just some of the more fiber-rich foods like oats, millet, quinoa, legumes, nuts, all the seed cycling stuff, all the fiber intake, all of that will help support good estrogen levels. Okay, so that whole list, those are all things that you can add in. And then if you have restrictions like you're doing the autoimmune protocol, you just only include the ones that work for you. And you can do a quote unquote elimination diet for these foods if you have estrogen deficiency, and figure out throughout the course of a cycle, just like we do in our 4-phase cycle detox. Then you, with the elimination diet, you can just do it for these foods and figure out which work for you the best and then include more of them into your diet. A lot of these foods and a lot of what you'll want to add in is also healthy fats. So in order for your body to create things like estrogen, it needs building blocks, and healthy fats and especially cholesterol are very important for that. That's what becomes the first sort of, cholesterol becomes the scaffold, and then other things get stuck on that compound to make it look like estrogen, and it changes over time. So incorporating healthy fats is really important, and the way that we generally like to break it down to make it really easy and not complicated is you want to have a third of your plates protein, a third of your plate with some sort of healthy fat, and a third of your plate like just different colored veggies or fruits, and then some carbs, a side of carbs. And so that's how we tend to break it down. And then every single meal and every single snack will have some healthy fat then as a result. And so that can be, instead of counting calories, you just try to balance your plate at every single meal and snack. And then if you're kind of looking for just one thing to add that might be helpful, grinding up your own flax seeds can be a really great way to go. So unfortunately, the compounds that we're looking for in flax seeds, they decompose when flax seeds are ground up. And so you want to slow that down. So you can either get whole flax seeds and grind them up before you eat them. So get like a cheap coffee grinder and just grind them up before breakfast or whatever you're going to put them in. Or if you're just like, there's no way I'm going to have time to do that, and if I don't do that, then I'm not going to eat them at all, then you can still buy the ground up ones, but it's easier to go to the bulk section and kind of get them freshly ground up, and then get a smaller serving so you go through it faster and it's not sitting around forever. And also keep it in your freezer so that decomposition of compounds happens slower over time and you can actually get to eating all of them. For dose, it's very individualized, so it's hard for me to say, but we generally, Megan and I, have worked up to 2 or 3 tablespoons throughout the day when we've been doing estrogen deficiency support. All right, so hopefully you guys found that helpful. Most people, unless they're super duper healthy and working on it, will fall into some of these categories. And what makes it a little bit more confusing is that you can have a little bit of a mixed picture when you have severe dysfunction. But hopefully you can sort of begin to think about what you've been diagnosed with, what you've been told about your lab work, and then go from there in terms of taking steps to do something about it, which we, of course, are all about. All right, ladies, that is it for estrogen. We're going to go on to progesterone and testosterone next. So come join me for that. All right, have a great day. We'll see you later.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this Podclass. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.